Story 1. The Town That Closed Early. The diner waitress smiled like she'd practiced it for years and said, "You're welcome to stay, but you can't be on the street after the church bell." I laughed because I didn't see a church. She didn't laugh back, and she slid my check across the table like it was a warning. I took a wrong turn off the highway because my GPS lost signal in the hills, and I convinced myself I'd find another on-ramp if I kept moving. The road narrowed into a two-lane strip between leafless trees and the kind of darkness you only see in rural places gathered close to the shoulder. When the first streetlight appeared, it felt like relief. When the second and third appeared, it felt like I'd crossed into a pocket of the world that had been waiting. The town was small in the most literal sense. One main street, two cross streets, a post office, a gas station with a hand-painted sign, and a diner with neon that buzzed softly like a tired insect. Most of the storefronts were dark, but not abandoned. The windows were clean, the signs were fresh. It looked like a place that chose to sleep early rather than a place that had died. I parked outside the diner, partly because my tank was low and partly because I wanted to see a human face that wasn't my own reflection in a windshield. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and fryer oil and lemon disinfectant. A handful of locals sat in booths, quiet in that small-town way where conversation doesn't need to fill the room because everyone already knows the same stories. The waitress looked up when I came in. She wasn't unfriendly, but her expression tightened a fraction, as if she was doing quick math. "Passing through?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just need gas and maybe a coffee." She nodded and led me to a booth near the window. "You'll want to be done before the bell," she said, casual, like it was about the kitchen closing. "The bell?" I asked. "The church bell," she said, and her eyes flicked toward the dark end of the street. "We close up when it rings." I smiled politely. "What time is that?" "Depends," she said, and set down a menu. "On when you get here." That should have been my cue to leave, but hunger and fatigue make you slow to respect hints. I ordered coffee and something simple. While I waited, I watched the street through the window. The lamps cast small circles of light on wet pavement. A thin fog hung low near the ground, and the town seemed to absorb sound. Even the neon buzz felt muffled. Across the street was a church. I hadn't noticed it at first because it was set back from the main road, its steeple swallowed by darkness. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw the outline of it, and I saw the bell tower window, a pale rectangle like a blank eye. The waitress returned with my food and the check at the same time, which struck me as odd until I realized she wanted the transaction finished early. "Just in case," she said, placing the check face down. "In case of what?" I asked, trying to keep it light. Her smile returned, careful and practiced. "In case you want to leave when the bell rings," she said. I ate quickly, more from tension than appetite, and I kept glancing at my phone. No service. The time was visible, though. 8:41 p.m. Not late, not remotely late, yet the town felt as if it was nearing curfew. At 8:45, the locals began to stand, not all at once, not dramatically, but with a synchronized efficiency that made my stomach tighten. They paid without talking. They didn't linger. They didn't look at each other for permission. They simply moved toward the door as if pulled by the same invisible schedule. The waitress appeared at my table again. "You should go," she said softly. I put cash on the table and stood. "Is something happening?" She hesitated, then leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Don't be outside when it rings," she whispered. "And if you hear your name, don't answer." My skin prickled. "My name?" She didn't respond, She turned and began flipping chairs onto tables with quick, practiced motions. I stepped outside into air that felt colder than it should. The streetlights seemed dimmer now, their halos swallowed by a thickening fog. The town was emptying fast. Doors clicked shut, curtains drew. A porch light switched off in one clean motion, then another, like a chain reaction. I walked toward my car, keys in hand, and that's when the church bell rang. Not loud, not a booming warning, a single clear note that cut through the fog like a blade. Everything stopped. Even the wind felt like it paused. Then, from somewhere down the street, a voice called my name. It was close enough to sound like it came from the edge of the nearest light circle, but there was no one standing there. The voice was gentle, conversational, as if a friend had spotted me and wanted to say hi. And it was my own voice. I froze. My heart hammered, and the urge to respond rose up automatically, the reflex of social life. But the waitress's warning hit me like cold water. Don't answer. The voice called again, still mine, slightly amused now. Hey, it said. Wait up. My fingers shook as I unlocked the car. The voice took a step closer, though I couldn't see anything moving. The fog shifted in a way that looked like a shoulder turning. Don't be rude, my voice said softly. I got into the car and locked the doors, breathing hard. The headlights cut through fog in narrow cones. The street ahead looked longer than it had moments before, as if the town had stretched. I started the engine. The dashboard clock blinked. 8:45 p.m. It hadn't moved. The church bell rang again, a second note, and the sound seemed to push against my chest. From outside my car, right beside the driver's window, my own voice whispered, intimate and patient. You can't leave until you check out. I stared at the fog beyond the glass, terrified to look directly at the spot where the voice was coming from. My hand found the gear shift. I drove. The tires rolled, but the scenery didn't change. The diner stayed in my peripheral vision. The same streetlight passed my hood, then passed again, as if the town had become a loop. The church bell rang once more, and my voice, now coming from the passenger seat as if it had found a way inside the cabin, said, You didn't pay the toll. I hit the gas harder, and the road finally released me. The last streetlight fell behind. My phone regained one shaky bar of service. The highway signs reappeared like a blessing. But when I looked at my rearview mirror, the town didn't shrink the way towns do. It stayed the same size, suspended in fog, as if it were pressed against the glass. And in the mirror, faint but clear, I saw a single streetlight blink twice, like a signal. Story 2. Everyone knew my car. I stopped for gas in a town so small it didn't even have a traffic light, and the cashier greeted me by saying, You're back early. I had never been there before in my life, and the strangest part was that his tone wasn't suspicious. It was relieved. I was driving through the Midwest at night, the long, flat kind of night where the horizon feels farther than it should. My goal was simple: get to a motel before midnight, sleep, and finish the trip in daylight. But a detour sign pushed me off the interstate, and the back roads turned into a mesh of farm lanes that all looked the same in darkness. When I saw the gas station, I felt the kind of relief you feel when you've been alone with your own thoughts too long. The station was old but open, lit by harsh white fluorescence that made the pumps look bleached. A single pickup truck sat near the side, engine off, no one visible. I pulled up, stepped out, and smelled wet gravel and cold air. The station's sign buzzed faintly, and in that buzz was a rhythm that made my skin crawl, like a code. Inside, the cashier looked up from a small TV behind the counter. He was middle-aged, tired, the kind of guy who had seen every version of Late-Night Traveler. He didn't say hello. He said, "You're back early." I smiled politely, thinking he'd mistaken me for someone else. "First time here," I said. "Just need to fill up." His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Sure," he said slowly. "First time." I brought a few snacks to the counter and put down my card. He didn't ring them up right away. He looked past me through the window toward my car. "What year is it?" he asked abruptly. I blinked. "What?" "What year is your car?" he clarified. "And what color exactly?" "It's a 2019, I said, confused. "Gray." He nodded as if that confirmed something. "Not the same," he murmured. A cold prickle ran down my spine. "Not the same as what?" He didn't answer immediately. He swiped my card and the machine beeped. Then it beeped again, like it had tried and failed. He swiped once more. The screen flashed an error. "No network," he said, too quickly. My phone had no signal either. I glanced down. Still nothing. The cashier leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice. "Don't drive toward the water tower," he said. "If your GPS tells you to, turn it off." The sentence landed heavy. "Why?" I asked. He exhaled like he hated the answer. "Because that's how it finds the ones who are lost," he said. My throat tightened. "What finds them?" The TV behind him flickered, and the screen switched from whatever late-night show he'd been watching to a security camera feed. The feed showed the gas station lot. My car was there, under the fluorescent canopy, and standing beside it was a figure. Not a person exactly, because it didn't have the right edges. It looked like a person-shaped absence, darker than the night around it, as if the camera couldn't resolve it. It stood at the driver's door, head tilted, waiting. I spun around to look through the window. The lot was empty. No figure. Only my car, still and ordinary. I turned back to the cashier, and he was watching my face like he'd seen this reaction before. "You see it on the camera," he said quietly. "Not with your eyes." My mouth went dry. "Is that why you thought I was back early?" He nodded. "They come back," he said. "Same car, same face, same tired look. They come in and pay for gas and ask for directions, and then they drive toward the water tower because something tells them it's the way out." I stared at the screen. The figure by my car hadn't moved. It stood too still, like a mannequin. "What happens if they go to the water tower?" I asked. The cashier's jaw tightened. "They stop being lost," he said, and the phrase sounded like a euphemism. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. A notification appeared even with no signal. "Route updated." Then another line. "Turn toward water tower." My stomach dropped. I showed the cashier the screen. He didn't look surprised. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, short descriptions of cars. Some pages had the same license plate written again and again, with different dates beside it, as if the town had been logging returns. He slid the notebook toward me and tapped a line. It had my license plate number written on it. Next to it was a date from last month. I stared at it until my eyes burned. "That's impossible," I whispered. The cashier's voice softened. Not impossible, he said, just repeating. On the security feed, the figure turned its head toward the camera, as if it had noticed we were watching. Then it lifted a hand and tapped on my driver's window. 3 taps, slow, patient. My chest tightened. The sound didn't reach us through the glass, but I could see the motion clearly, and that was enough. The cashier leaned forward. "Listen," he said. "If you leave, leave now. Don't look at the water tower. Don't follow your map. Drive until you hit the interstate again, even if it takes longer." I swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" He hesitated, then said, "Because the last person who didn't make it was my brother." Something cold moved in my gut. I nodded, grabbed my snacks, and moved toward the door. The cashier called after me, "And if you hear someone say your name, don't answer." Outside, the air felt heavier. My headlights flickered once when I unlocked my car. I got in quickly and locked the doors. In the rearview mirror, the gas station security camera sign reflected faintly in the window glass. And for half a second, I saw the dark figure standing in the back seat. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. I started the engine and drove. The road out of town curved gently, and as I passed the last cluster of houses, I saw the water tower in the distance, a pale shape rising above fog. My phone buzzed again. "Turn now." The steering wheel felt suddenly too light under my hands, like it wanted to move by itself. I fought it, white-knuckled, staying straight. Then my own voice came from the car speakers, calm and close. "You're back early," it said. I kept driving until the interstate signs appeared. Only then did the pressure ease, and only then did my phone signal return. When I stopped at a rest area an hour later, I checked my call log to prove to myself this was real. There were no missed calls. But there was a new contact saved in my phone, one I had never added. Water tower. Story 3. The library basement rules. The librarian stamped my card, smiled, and said, "We close at 6. Then, without changing her expression, she added, "And the basement closes when it's done with you." I thought it was a small-town joke until the stairwell door locked behind me with a click that sounded final. I stopped in the town because my car needed a brake and I needed a map. My phone was practically useless in that area, and the GPS kept rerouting me in circles like it couldn't decide where the roads were. I saw a brown sign for a public library and felt an odd sense of comfort. Libraries are predictable places, quiet, safe. Their rules are printed, not whispered. The building looked like it had been renovated recently, but the bones were old. Brick facade, tall windows, a heavy wooden door that opened with a polite creak. Inside it smelled like paper and dust and the faint sweetness of old glue. A small-town library has a particular atmosphere, like the air has been turned down to a whisper. The librarian sat at the front desk, older, hair pinned neatly, glasses on a chain. She looked up as I approached and smiled with the practiced warmth of someone who has seen every kind of traveler drift in to warm up. "Need a computer?" she asked. "Just a map," I said. "My phone's not cooperating." She nodded as if that was common. "You can use the reference section," she said. "Third aisle. And if you need local roads, we keep the county books downstairs." "Downstairs?" I asked, glancing around. I hadn't noticed a staircase. She pointed past a row of shelves. "Basement," she said. "Door's over there." Then she stamped a small slip of paper and slid it toward me. "We close at 6, she said, smiling. "Got it," I said. "And the basement closes when it's done with you," she added, still smiling.
I laughed awkwardly, assuming it was local humor. Right, I said. Fair enough. Her eyes stayed on mine for a beat too long.
Then she looked down at her book and said gently, "Don't read aloud down there." The sentence landed heavier than a joke. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but she had already returned to her paperwork, effectively ending the conversation. I found the basement door where she'd pointed. It was painted a dull white with a metal push bar. A simple sign on it read, "Archives." I pushed and stepped into a stairwell that smelled cooler, damper, like stone. The lights were on, but they felt weaker as I descended, as if the bulbs were tired. The walls were painted a pale color that didn't quite reach the corners, leaving shadows tucked in like mold. At the bottom was another door, heavier, with a small window set into it. Through the window, I could see shelves and stacks, and the faint outline of filing cabinets. I pushed the door and stepped into the basement. The air changed immediately. It had that archive smell, paper, dust, and something metallic like old staplers. The room was larger than I expected, with rows of shelves that created narrow corridors of shadow. A few fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, leaving pockets of darkness between them. I walked slowly, listening to the soft squeak of my shoes on the floor. The place felt empty, but not abandoned. It felt maintained, curated, like someone wanted it this way. A sign on the nearest shelf read, "County Maps." I pulled out a binder and set it on a table. The binder was heavy, thick with folded paper. I flipped through until I found the highway layout I needed. As I studied it, I noticed something odd. There was a section labeled Unincorporated Areas, and beneath it was a map that looked hand-drawn rather than printed. It showed a cluster of roads in a shape that resembled a loop, with the town at its center like a knot. At the edge of the loop, in small, careful letters, were words that made my mouth go dry. Closes early. I frowned, thinking it was a note from some long-dead librarian. Then I realized the handwriting wasn't old. The ink looked fresh. I glanced around the basement. Still no one. Only shelves and shadows. I went back to the printed maps and tried to focus, but the basement's quiet felt thicker now. The buzz of the lights sounded like distant insects. The air felt slightly more humid, as if something unseen had exhaled. A faint sound came from behind me, a page turning. I spun around. No one was there. The shelves stood in their rows. The table behind me was empty. Then I heard it again, closer this time, as if someone had stepped near the table and flipped a page in the binder I'd just closed. I backed away, slowly, heart tightening. I looked toward the stairwell door. It was still there, but the window looked darker now, as if the light upstairs had dimmed. I walked toward it. As I reached the door, the metal handle turned slightly under my hand, like it was alive. Then it clicked. Locked. I tried again, harder. The handle moved, but the latch didn't release. The door had become a wall. Behind me, on the shelves, a book slid out slightly, as if pushed from inside. It paused halfway out, resting like a finger pointing. The title on its spine was simple, stamped in gold. Rules. My throat went dry. I didn't want to touch it, but the urge to read it, to understand, was a hook in my chest. I stepped closer and pulled it free. Inside were typed pages in plastic sleeves, like someone had compiled them carefully. The first page read, "Basement Rules. Do not read aloud. Do not answer if you hear your name. Do not follow the sound of turning pages. If the lights flicker, keep your eyes on the floor. If you see a map with a loop, close it. My hands shook. I whispered, "What is this?" From somewhere between shelves, a voice answered softly. It was my voice. "Read it aloud," it said. I froze. The words weren't threatening. They were coaxing, like a friend urging you to break a silly superstition. The voice came again, closer.
"Read it aloud," my voice repeated. "It's just paper."
My heart hammered. I clamped my mouth shut, refusing to give it sound. The fluorescent lights flickered once, dimming the basement for a fraction of a second. In that dimness, I saw something on the floor, a shadow that did not match mine. It stretched from the end of a shelf toward my feet, like a hand reaching. I snapped my gaze down, remembering the rule, and stared at the worn tile. Dust drifted across it in a slow curl, like breath. The voice whispered again, still mine, patient. "You won't get out unless you check out." I held the rules binder tight and did something that felt childish but necessary. I shook my head slowly, like I was refusing a hypnotist. Then I remembered the librarian upstairs. "Don't read aloud," she'd said. "Basement closes when it's done with you." I realized the basement wasn't closing because it was malfunctioning. It was closing because it was listening, and it wanted a very specific sound from me, my own voice consenting. I took a deep breath through my nose, kept my eyes on the floor, and walked along the shelves without looking up, using the aisle gaps to guide me. I moved slowly, feeling for airflow, for any hint of the stairwell's cooler draft. The page-turning sound followed me, always just behind my shoulder, like someone walking and flipping pages to keep pace. I found the stairwell door by touch more than sight. I pressed my palm against it. It was cold. Real. I pushed the bar. For a moment, it resisted. Then it clicked and opened, as if it had decided I'd passed some test. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the main library, heart pounding. The librarian looked up, not surprised. She glanced at the clock behind her. It read 5:58. "You found what you needed?" she asked gently. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. I nodded. She smiled. "Good," she said. "Now don't take those roads at night." I stumbled outside into fading daylight, breathing hard. The town looked normal again, quiet in an ordinary way. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere. Reality returned to its usual rules. In my car, I unfolded the map I'd copied from memory. The loop roads weren't on it anymore, but in the margin, in handwriting that looked like mine, one sentence had appeared. "Thank you for checking in."